maybe after week 9, so that way they don't have to change that pick to a 4th rounder.
Right, when it's after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, because they said he has to pay 51% of the plays, and then that draft pick becomes a 4th rounder. So I guess it all depends on what their season looks like.
If he's playing like Russell Wilson, and I don't know 17 or whatever, of course he's going to play out the season. But I don't think he is. I think he's Yeah.
Welcome to the behind-the-scenes conversation about the NFL, where Patrick Clark and Nikolaj Ronnow consistently harass me about the state of the Chicago Bears.
I did not. I did the opposite.
No. It's always culminating in something that's embarrassing about being.
You're going to make the playoffs. You're in a shitty division. You're going to make the playoffs.
I don't know.
Is it a shitty division?
Green Bay looked good at the end of the year. So
Green Bay will win the division. Minnesota's trash. And Green Bay is going to be good. They're going to
Sam Darnold. You're calling Sam Darnold trash?
Yes, I'm calling Sam Darnold trash. Detroit Lions had a good year. You can't win anything by biting off someone's kneecaps. I love Dan Campbell though. He's a great coach. All right, CrossFit.
So here we are. We're being we're getting lessons in football from a European. So but that kind of segues into what we're talking about, I guess.
To be handball.
Yeah. Well, we've had I think we have had Niko, have you ever been on our podcast before? I'm trying to remember the last time we had you on.
I was on with Bella where we talked about FitFest.
Yes.
Someone in the comments is saying, "Hey honey, you got to be specific. Which one of these talking to?"
It's always Patrick.
No, it's not, definitely not me.
It's a picture of Audrey.
Yeah. It's definitely Audrey.
Okay, yes, we did have Niko on after FitFest. He was there in Birmingham to cover the competition for us. So if you saw any of the interviews or reels or anything that B.Friendly Fitness put out following that competition, that was Niko. No shortage of experience covering the sport of CrossFit, and in particular has been as plugged in, I would say, with the top level athletes in Europe for as long as anyone I know. He's a very good friend of Frederick Agidius and Annie Thor's daughter. When did you first start working with them or having exposure to elite CrossFit in Europe?
So that was 2012 when regionals, for you young kids, it's what semifinals used to be called. Regionals was in Copenhagen, where I lived, and I signed up as a volunteer, which I would recommend to anyone interested in the sport of CrossFit. And CrossFit had sent over a few people. They sent over Tony Budding, former head of media, and Dave Castro was there for like a day and a half, and Tyson Oldroyd. I randomly ran into Tyson, had a chat, and would not know he would become a lifelong friend. And I just started shooting for them. Frederick qualified. He won the regionals that year. Annie obviously won. I think she won all the events. I think he got 6 points that regionals. She did set a world record on 3 back-to-back events. And first off on Diane, which was the first workout. And then Tyson Oldroyd had me shoot a profile of Frederick. So I went down to Butcher's lab where Frederick was training at the time and met him for the first time. And we just headed off, and he was like, afterwards, like,
Niko, we're just gonna have to end the podcast. She got 7 points that year. She took second place on event 5.
Catherine beat her on the snatch. Catherine beat her on the snatch with hold on. A 165 snatch or 175.
Katrin hit 165. Annie hit 155, which is good enough for second. She did win every other workout.
It's close enough.
And the Iceland went 1, 2, 3 that year. Annie Thor's daughter, Katrin Davis' daughter, Turi Helgadottir.
Yeah.
I had to fact check you on that.
It's close. I saw when your eyes are drifting, like, oh, you're second screening something over here.
Well, there's not. I mean, that's obviously an incredible performance, but it's like I feel like if she won every single event, that I would have had like a better memory of it than if she had.
You weren't into that much CrossFit that year.
No, I was not. There was a year before.
On the other hand, Frederick, I think, didn't win a single event that year, and ended up winning ahead of Mikko Arumpa and Nurisner Katrinazan, just ahead of Laser Kovacs.
Yeah, I don't know how to Numisnar. Yes.
Yeah.
Very good memory. In fact, he won
the Pendleton event and dehydrated.
And he got into the games on a tiebreaker over Lacey Kovacs that year.
Yeah.
And he is one of those guys that can win. He did win 2 of the events, and you are correct that Frederick didn't win any, but he did have.
Frederick doesn't have what you call home run hits. He did win an open workout though a few years back with the toes to bar, dumbbell thrusters, and double unders. So, but yeah, he's not a home run hitter.
Annie would disagree.
Potentially one of the open workouts that caused the introduction of floor plans, and obviously since then we've seen the removal of floor plans, because that was, that workout was with the dumbbell thrusters, toes to bar, and jump rope. I think it was very similar to this year's rowing, deadlift, and double under workout, where for the best athletes in the world, they're literally just moving in a circle for 20 minutes. But yeah, his performance on that was extremely impressive.
Have you ever seen the video? So he basically, he lets the jump rope go, and he goes over and just grabs the scorecard and just turns to the camera, because he knew like he was a full round ahead of BKG. Like no one's
Yeah, and like I said, Frederick is a good friend of yours, has been for a long time. We've talked about him on podcasts before about some of the maybe relative unknown success that he's had over a long period of time.
Greatest athlete in Denmark of all time.
And one of the best open athletes of all time, very consistently in the mix and/or qualifying for the CrossFit Games out of Europe. And so, not only has Niko had this decade-plus long experience of shooting for the sport of CrossFit, doing videography with the Games documentary team, covering regionals, traveling on locations to do things with different athletes. He knows some of the best athletes in the world personally. He's trained with them a lot. And for the topic that we have today, which is to kind of do a deep dive, I guess, into what the European men's field looks like this year, I couldn't think of anyone else better kind of to bring in for the conversation than Niko. So thank you for joining us.
Anytime.
He does also have a podcast, as you see there below his name, Fitness for Time podcast. He's had some pretty prestigious guests on there from Europe, also from the US, athletes, as well as media personalities and people who are involved in the sport of CrossFit. Some really good conversations. So if you're kind of into that thing, it's they're pretty intimate conversations because he knows these people well. They're usually like 45 minutes to an hour long, it seems like.
It depends. And sometimes they're in Danish. So if you don't speak Danish,
you'll know which ones are not in Danish.
If
you scroll through.
The one with Fraser was definitely in Danish, correct?
Yeah. Yep. He's super talented. Someone says I look like the guy from The Killing, which would be Joel. What's his name?
Oh,
Joel Kinnaman.
And
you know what? Yeah, Jake Chapman, I appreciate you.
That's a good compliment.
And you know what? It's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
Boom.
Oh.
So, I just, before we kind of get to the men in Europe, I just want to put this kind of disclaimer out there about this episode. We could have chosen the women in Europe. We could have chosen the men or the women in North America East. And for different reasons, we could have chosen some different regions around the world. But the general concept is kind of the same. And we might do some focuses on some different regions in the next couple of weeks as well. But in particular, the men's field in Europe, I think, is a really good case study of what's going on within the competitive sport of CrossFit as far as the CrossFit Games season is concerned. Based on the traveling that I did last year, I've actually gotten to see a ton of these guys compete in person. Some of them you guys know well, of course. Others are somewhat known and kind of people are expecting them to make a breakthrough. But there's also a group of guys out there that have been doing some smaller competitions outside of the CrossFit Games season that have looked really impressive. And I think that kind of all of that will lend itself nice to this conversation as a kind of a microscopic view of the big picture reality that if you want to have success in the CrossFit Games season now, opportunity is at a premium in a way that it never has been before. The 40 spots in Europe, 40 and 80 total spots in North America East, or in North America between the East and the West, is basically saying that amongst these regions where you have thousands of men, particularly, that are pursuing this at an elite level, the spots available are so small, the margins for error are so small, especially in the quarterfinal stage, that some of the names that we talk about today that well, that you would expect to see at a semifinals and possibly even be in the conversation or at the CrossFit Games will not make the semifinals this year. That's how deep the field is. That's how critical the quarterfinal stage will be. But at the same time, these are athletes that are competing, like we mentioned. And so if you're following us and following our coverage, and they don't have the CrossFit Games season that they want, you'll still probably see some of these names popping up throughout the course of the coverage that we do over the totality of the year, whether it's in the game season or not. Thoughts about that, Niko?
I think there will be some people that's going to miss out, but at the end of the day, we're not going to see people miss out on the games, which essentially is the most important thing. It will, however, create a longer road to the games for, let's say, let's take my friend last year, Rebecca Widdesen. She would not have made the CrossFit Game, not have made the semifinals, nor would she have made the CrossFit Games. The same case could have been, you can fact check me on this one, David Soronki would also not have made Yellow Host, of course. And he, I think Andre is working on it, but he is one of those guys because he is who he is, and he's like a peaks and valley kind of guy. I think Andre is closing those gaps, though. We'll get back to that. But he is a peaks and valleys guy. And if you are a peaks and valley guy, you can end up on the short end of the stick and take 45th and thereby not making it. Because some people are great at performing on the live stage. Some people are better at performing online. And we've seen that multiple years, in any region.
And just in general, this statement that I make about the premium for the spots and the small margins for error over the history of the 10 plus years that you've watched, CrossFit competitions and the evolution of it in Europe, do you feel like that's a fair statement, that it's getting even harder to make it to the semifinal and the game stage than it was? Or was there a period of time that you felt that maybe it was even, there were even less spots and it was harder then than it is now?
Let me go back to 2012 and then 13. In 13, however, we did have the rule: if a former world champion, a winner of the CrossFit Games, showed up, it would activate another spot. People weren't really sure. Ironically, Fit, I will comment on that because that's simply not correct. We'll get to that. I think when there's only 3 spots available in Europe, on the women's side, it was a nightmare. Like 1 year. We have 5 spots that year, however, but 3 of them belong to Annie, Catherine, and Sarah. Basically, all 3 capable of winning the CrossFit Games. Catherine did go on to win the CrossFit Games and Annie podium that year. But it was harder when there's only 3. When we have 10, let's say 10, I think that's kind of what we're basing this discussion on. Maybe 9, maybe 12. I don't think anyone who's able to break the top 10 in the CrossFit Games would be left out. So the BKGs and the Janikowskis as well will find their way, but we almost saw BKG mess it up last year. He was dealing with an injury. There was some stuff going on. We also saw him having an injury at the games with his back, but he almost didn't make it. Yellowhost almost didn't make it. So there's a lot of these. We didn't know how good Yellow exactly was, but yeah, it is hard. I think the field is getting deeper. I don't necessarily think it's getting closer to closing that gap on North America on the top end.
Yeah, so we can pull that comment back up, Patrick, because it is a good kind of a starting point, I guess, to maybe make a couple of different distinctions. So when you see a comment like this, I feel like the talent in Europe is starting to outpace the North America region, and in this instance, we're talking about the men. When you start throwing out names that could possibly win the CrossFit Games or make the podium at the CrossFit Games, there's not really any Europeans that come to mind right now with the state of where CrossFit is for me. What do you think, Niko?
Well, I prepared a rant, so here we go.
Ooh, all right,
all right. This is the last 10 years of the CrossFit Games. Top 5 finishes from Europe have been 4 times BKG has made it into the top 5. Janikowski has never broken the top 5. And obviously, Lucas Högberg was his tiny little flag, took third in 2018 ahead of Fikowski on the tiebreaker. Podiums. They've had 3 podiums, 2 with BKG and one for Lucas. Outside of that, the last 10 years, they have had top 10 finishes. Yannick Koski, 15, BKG in 16, Koski in 17, Willie George and Rasmus Andersen in 18, Mundvall in 19, Koski and BKG in 2020. Lasse Duke is back-to-back in 21, 22, 23, and BKG in 2022. That gives us, and Jelhost, of course, in 2023. That's given 18 top 10 finishes over 10 years. That's a 1.8 average. If we go and do the same stuff with the United States, North America, they have, out of 30 possible podiums, they have 25 podiums. And they've won every single CrossFit Games. Rich Froning 1, Matt Fraser 5, Justin Medeiros 2, and Jeffrey Adler 1. They had 25 podiums. That's 83% of the podiums have belonged to North America. They have 70 out of 100 top 10 finishes, 70%. And people are going to say, well, it's just about they have these 2 big name athletes. Same in Europe. We have 2 big name athletes, Yannick Koski and BKG, who is legends of the sport. If we remove those 2 from Yannick Koski and BKG from the sport of CrossFit, let's step into another multiverse where these 2 aren't here. We have 1 podium finish in Europe, and we have 7 out of 100 possible top 10 finishes. If we do the same, let's remove the 2 best North Americans, Patrick Vellner and Matt Fraser. Rich Froning was a prior era in this. They are exactly the same. Nothing changes. People just move up 1 spot, and we move BKG and everyone else. They lose 2 spots inside the top 10. They still won every single CrossFit Games. They still have 25 out of 30 podiums, and they have 68 out of 100 top 10 finishes. So the notion that Europe is coming, sorry, John Singleton, love you. You've coined that phrase. Europe is good, but they're not special on the men's side. They're just not special. And the stats is right there. And Yannick, you can call me in a second, and maybe he's going to break the top 10 again. I think he will. But the notion that Europe is strong and they're not being treated correctly, the stats are there. The score is 70 to 18.
Right, and that's a great historical perspective. Again, that's just over the course of the last 10 years, and he's basically just pulled the data of winners, podium finishes, top 10. And I saw Ironically Fit Wade back in talking about talent, not potentially winning, but we're kind of breaking it down. So right now, if you were putting odds on a European to make the podium, it would be really small. If you're putting odds for 2 to 3 Europeans to finish inside the top 10, that's a good bet. You can probably expect 2 on average Europeans, and some years 3. And if everything goes perfectly, possibly 4 guys to get inside the top 10. But there's a difference between being 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and being 1, 2, 3, maybe 4.
Yeah.
Barkley, of course, would love that.
Well, BKG is basically a shoe-in to make the top 10. He's always right there. Patrick Vellner told me when he's in the middle of a workout and looking around the field of play, if he can see BK and he's like a little bit ahead of him, right next to him, he's like, I'm okay. That's his Northern Star within a workout. He knows you just stay right where BK is and then maybe crush him in the end, and then you're good.
Right. And for context, BKG did miss the top 10 last year by 1 spot, taking a 0 basically on the Olympic lift with that back injury. And that ended a streak of basically a decade straight of 9 consecutive top 10 finishes. The guy is, all of the accolades, all of the nicknames, everything that is mentioned about BKG. I actually kind of liked it this week. He put a video of himself squatting on Monday, and his former teammate Tola Morak, put a video up. He goes, if King Beeks is squatting on Monday, I'm squatting on Monday. All the guys that know this about BKG, when you have guys like Pat Vellner talking about that, absolutely. But it's rare. There haven't been, and maybe Lazar Jukic becomes that next athlete that can string together those runs. But so far,
what are you? I'm sorry, Lazar, but what are you basing this on? He has a 9th, a 8th, and a 9th.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. So far, in the 3 top 10 finishes, his best finish is more or less BKG's worst finish. He has a BKG had that 11th, and then he's got an 8th, an 8th, and a 9th as his 3 worst finishes over the last 10 years otherwise, which are Lazar's best finish. And that's just a good example. Lazar Jukic is a savage athlete, multiple-time European champion, multiple off-season wins and podiums. The guy's phenomenal, but the margins between 8, 9, 10 to 6, 7, 5 to being in the hunt for the podium to winning the CrossFit Games are very real, and there are levels there.
And he didn't even do the full workout, and he couldn't finish. Sorry, Lazar, I had to do that. But talk about talent. If we look ahead, I think there is something to be said that, like, we don't have a potential games winner. Like, BKG is never going to win the CrossFit Games. Janikowski is never going to win the CrossFit Games. And yeah, I said that to their face. And there's a long way from 6th to 5th. There's an even longer way from 5th to 4th. And once you get to 4th to 3rd, it just gets incrementally harder. However, should Europe have a podium finish? Not this year. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm excited to see what Janikowski is going to do. He's had a good offseason. Podium is a stretch. Victor Hoffer is the only one I see within a foreseeable future that can break the podium for Europe.
Excellent. So I think that's a kind of a good intro to what just the reality is when it comes to the success that European men have had historically and what can be expected this year. We know that the top of the men's field is extremely competitive. We know who those guys are, and it's going to take a Herculean and monumental performance from anyone else to crack into that top 4 or 5 position. But there's a host of Europeans that can threaten for top 10 spots, top 20 spots. But that's a long ways off. In the meantime, we've got to get to the semifinal.
Who doesn't like me? Without a profile picture?
Their name is literally Aha. It's like, I got you.
Aha.
Anyway, we have obviously a couple stages of the season to go, and so we want to kind of look at what that's going to be. So this article that I put out today, great picture from Lowlands Throwdown in 2021. Those are the 5 CrossFit Games qualifiers there, and as Jake Chapman said, 5 qualifiers and 40 abs. Obviously, just the general physique for someone that's that good. So our starting point here was just to look at last season, because on the men's side, unlike the women's side in Europe, all 11 of the athletes that qualified last year to the CrossFit Games, I believe, are throwing their name in the ring again to qualify. And how did we get to the number 11? Just in case you're unfamiliar, Europe is actually guaranteed a minimum of 5 spots on both the men and women's side. After quarterfinals, they will have after quarterfinals, they'll reevaluate the worldwide ranking system based on the
Lazar.
Yes, Lazar is there. Based on the metrics that CrossFit has put out, they'll look at who's in the top 100, and then they'll run this distribution. We can expect that the European men, I think it's pretty comfortable to say the European men will get 11 or 12 spots to the CrossFit Games. So it'll be very similar to next year. I would say 10 to 12 is probably the range in the best and worst case scenarios. It's hard to get an extra spot. 12 spots would be phenomenal. 10 or 11 seems like very realistic for them. These are the 11 guys that made it last year. Niko, just straight off the bat, when you look at this list, how many of these guys do you feel comfortable making a return to the CrossFit Games this year?
Well, first off, I got to apologize to David Soronki. I said he wouldn't have made it, and he finished 39th. He would have made it by the skin of his teeth. Yellow Hoster wouldn't have made it. Comfortable making it? Okay, relax, Lazar. You're going to make it. Lazar Dukic is going to make it for sure. Henrik Kapalainen for sure. Morris Vibeke. Yellow Hoster will make it. The point system being this, not being the reward point system, is going to be the positioning point system. Is not good for Yellow, but I've talked to Andre multiple times, his coach, Andre Houdet, and I know he's closed a lot of gaps. And what I saw from Yellow Host on the first open workout, which was not a tall guy workout, dumbbell snatches and burpees, that was enough for me to say he's making it to semifinals. Janikowski, come on, he just won the open. I'm going to go down to BKG. He's gonna make it. Are you saying making it to semifinals or to the games?
Games.
Okay. Yes, BKG is going to make it to the games, and I think Fabian Benito is having a good run. He's getting better and better and better, and he's closing some gaps. He made a few mistakes early on in his career, but it's getting better and better and better. And that puts me at 8, right? 1, 2.
I think that was the top
4.
5 plus BK and Fabian. So you're doing like 6 or 7 guys that you feel.
That was my 7 guys I feel comfortable with, and then I have 2 more guys, and I only have 9 on my list.
Right. And so then, now you're looking at like you have Uldis Upenex in this mix. He's been a consistent qualifier to the CrossFit Games. Obviously, he does well in the online competitions as well. And then some bigger guys, Sharonke, Alenkovic, Wesolowski, who did very well with the semifinals programming last year. I would say of those 3 guys, probably Sharonke is the one that would be the least surprising to make it through just based on his history. Bronislaw seemed to make some changes in his training that have been beneficial for him. And Wesolowski, I would say, was the wild card biggest surprise on the men's side last year at semifinals. Now, those are the people that made it last year, and probably the ones that, for the most part, general fans are the most familiar with because they were at the CrossFit Games. We'll scroll down to this next group, and basically I've pulled out 9 other guys that I would personally say round out the current top 20 in Europe. These are just my estimations. You're going to see as we go through this list that there's a lot of good athletes in Europe, but based on everything that I know about these athletes, these are another 9 that I think are certainly in the conversation to take some CrossFit Games spots. Niko, when you look at this list, do you think there's anyone that doesn't deserve to be on it, or are there some guys that you would say, I really have my eye on them?
I don't want to go that route. Who doesn't deserve to be on it? There might be some data I don't have. The first one I look at is Victor Hofer. Outside of doing pretty poorly on the running workout, the first workout, he did great. And he set a world record on one of the workouts, and he is evolving as an athlete. I know he's been working with Erik Laukellner from Denmark as a weightlifting coach.
Hasn't every European?
I think he's done a little bit more, but yeah, everyone has basically. No, but Victor Hofer is a unique talent. He's young, and when people doubt him, just like remember what you were like when you were 18 to 19, and then moving on. The steps he can take in a year is not comparable to the steps Luka Dukic can take. Just to stay with the Dukic brothers because he's older. Luka Dukic, however, is also one I would put on that list. I think he's gathered so much competition experience. His talent is undeniable. So I think, and to be fair, he did withdraw from the semifinals, right? So he didn't even compete.
Yeah, he actually, when I was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, about a month ago now, he told me the full story of that kind of the week leading up to the semifinals and what happened and everything that he tried to make it. And it was just one of the worst illnesses that he's had in a while. Yeah. And that's the nature of the sport, is that there's only one weekend for quarterfinals and there's only one weekend for semifinals. And if you get sick or injured, there's really nothing you can do about it.
Well, for me, Luka Dukic is a games athlete. He belongs to that conversation, and I'll put him there. But the strongest guy on this list is undeniably Adrian Wundweiler. He took last year off. You can go listen to my podcast with him. He didn't take it last year off, but he made the mistake, and maybe not mistake, but he chose to compete at a lot of events, which basically wore him out. He made a lot of money that year, a lot more money than he would have made at the CrossFit Games. So, sometimes you make business decisions to make money. Adrian did that. But this year he's coming back. He's injury-free. He did the open workouts, one and done, didn't really think about it, and he did great. His training is going great from all I know. But Adrian Wundweiler, and I'll put him in. Once we go to the live competition, he's going to be hungry, and people are starting to write him off. And that's a mistake when it comes to Adrian, because he's good with a chip on his shoulder, and hungry dogs run faster.
Yeah, and we've seen kind of over and over again in this sport that even with the young guys coming up, athletes like Wundweiler, like Bukowski, Gudmundsson, in other parts of the world, these Vellners and Fikowskis, guys have been around for a long time. There's like that experience, that fortitude that's developed over a career, like that's a real thing, and it's difficult to unseat these guys. It's an interesting list because you see, 4 of the guys on this list, the top 4 guys there, were the next 4 out last year at semifinals. Agnola Kai and Guillaume Briant, just a little bit worse than that in the low 20s. And then 2 withdraws from 2 guys who've made the CrossFit Games before, and Adrian Moonweiler, who didn't even compete in the season last year. So suddenly, when Niko looks at that list and he goes, I feel like 6 or 7 of these guys will make it back to the games. And I see Hoffer, this rising star. I see Luka Jukic, who's on par with games athletes, and Moonweiler throwing his name back into the ring. The margin for error to make it to the CrossFit Games in Europe is diminishing extremely fast.
Yeah. Can we see the next part? Did you include the? Yeah.
And I'll just say, because you're talking a lot. Adrian is 8th all time in elite event wins with 30, 10 of them coming from the 2022-23 off season. So this is from B.Friendly stats database that Barkley is responsible for. He's pulling that information. And obviously also he's got a lot of wins in the last 2 years as a tribute to what Niko was saying about his choice to compete a lot in non-CrossFit Games season events.
So I think he said it on my podcast. He was getting paid by Nike for competing at official CrossFit events and winning those. So he went to basically everything that was a CrossFit licensed event he was going to. So
question about Zanoni here. And so this is what we're talking about. This is why we're doing this show, is because obviously Enrico Zanoni is in the picture at the top, having qualified for the games on a phenomenal performance in the final workout in Amsterdam that year. It's probably to this day still the most impressive thing I've seen him do, closing out that competition with those 10 overhead squats at 100 kilos, while people like Luka Jukic and Adrian Moonweiler and Ulla Supernex were collapsing on the floor and failing reps. He did 10 in a row and punched a ticket to the CrossFit Games. Hasn't been able to make it back there since, but him, along with Antoine Dumain, Martin Cuero, Victor Helsinghoff, and Gregor Marijusz, which, man, that's such a tough name.
Europe, yeah.
But anyway, they were all in the top 20 last year also, but I didn't include them in the top 20 for my just assessment of where the field is at right now. That's not to say that these guys can't make the top 20. There's no guarantees, is kind of what I'm saying in this portion of the list. There's a ton, dozens and dozens of athletes that are to be considered. And there's some guys on this list that even though they haven't had the success of making the CrossFit Games like a Zanoni, that are coming up and have the potential to disrupt some of these athletes that you may be expecting to go ahead.
Who's your wild card? If you don't go based off stats and they've done this and that, if you just go, you've seen a lot of competitions. I have one person on this that I think I don't think he necessarily will qualify, but when we're entering Sunday, he's going to have the opportunity to qualify. If he executes on Sunday, I don't know, but I think he'll be in the mix.
Yeah, I agree. PC, can you scroll down just to see the last little part of the list there? Because there's some
going all the way down.
Well, this is another group of 20. So this list that ends here with Mantila or Buckland, Mantila, and Maizaradze, these would be in a theoretical 40. Not this list. Go back to the other one. Sorry. Just so we can see the bottom half of this one here. Yeah. So this is a theoretical example of 40 men in Europe that could make the CrossFit Games, and those bottom 7, just like Adrian Moonweiler and in a different way, Yorgos Kervis and Luka Jukic, weren't present at the semifinals last year. Lucas Hoyza competes on a team historically. He's a kind of a wild card for me that is largely unknown on the individual field that could make some waves. But I'm guessing the same athlete that you're thinking of is Tommaso Pieri. He works with Andre Houdet, who you've already mentioned. I saw him and Andre, in a competition setting in Italy, in Milan, at the Fall Series Throwdown last December, where he won the competition. He beat Anastas Artemis basically just it came down to the fact that Anastas is not very good at ring muscle ups, and this is a recurring problem for him in competitions and keeps him kind of out of the mix. But it was more the process for Tommy and Andre that they were refining and practicing there. I actually had a chance to go out to dinner with Andre. I had some conversation with Tommy after the competition was over. And Niko can speak to this in a lot more detail than I can. But at a young age, Andre Houdet is as organized and detail oriented as a coach that exists in CrossFit.
He is He's one of a kind based on what he does. He's a former linebacker in American football, which means you have the whole field ahead of you and have to figure out what's happening on the fly. His ability to call audibles and read the workout and figure out the correct game plan, not only for himself as he was competing, but for his athletes. I saw that at FitFest where he changed. Who was it? Jason Hopper and whoever he was competing with. He changed their strategy. Just said through Helgerada, changed the strategy completely, and it just ended up beating the guy on the right, which was Brent Fikowski, the professor. So they only got beaten by strategy. They just had a better game plan. Andre is phenomenal at game plans, and he seems to have a very good match with Tommy. And Andre only has 4 athletes. That's he only coaches 2 men, 2 women, and yet the rest are being coached by his secondary coaches. Not secondary in that sense, but assistant coaches, whatever you want to call it. So he picks these people because he really wants to work with them and he believes in them. He could have his choice of a lot of different athletes. So if he chooses to work with Tommaso, there's a reason for it. And what I've seen so far, it's I'm not saying he's going to qualify for the games. That's Rory McKernan once said, qualifying for the CrossFit Games is a mental illness. It is difficult to qualify for the games for anyone, but I think Andre is going to put him in a spot where he's going to have a shot at it, and that itself is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that you're aware of that. Again, it was really insightful to be able to watch their process and then talk to them about all of the different things that they were learning. And like they intentionally put that competition on the calendar to go there together to practice different things and then take those learnings back with the very clear intention of improving those processes if needed for the semifinals. And so that's kind of where their focus is, and that's what they're focusing on. And you've heard Niko talk about it now in a couple different times with both Jelle Hoste and Tommy Pieri, that those are the 2 male athletes that he is investing his time in right now. And I think that it's a worthwhile endeavor for both the athletes and Andre. I'd expect them, whatever the season results in terms of how far they make it or how well they do at any stage of the season.
Yeah.
If you've been following those athletes or know anything about them historically, don't be surprised if you see a refined version of both of them when it comes to game day.
Definitely, yeah. I think outside of those names, there will always be someone we don't know. Like last year, we had Rebecca Widdison, we had Jelle Host,
Mikael Wasilowski.
Yes, Ella Wunger's been around for a while and kind of
been around, but she's never really threatened to make the games.
Yeah,
and then she did pretty candidly.
And I remember I wanted to talk to David Sarunke leading up to the semifinals. He's like, "Dude, I'm going to take last place," and he was being legit. This wasn't like official. There's like a text between me and him. He's like, "No, I'm not doing that," and then he has some qualifying. So, but. That being said, it's still sports and there's still programming and there's still execution on game day. And of these 15 guys I've mentioned, one of them will most likely get injured. That's just statistics. One of them will be injured. So someone else is going to make it. Am I saying Uldis Upeniks can't make the CrossFit Games? Of course I'm not. That'd be insane to say that. Bronislav Olenkovic he's what, 36 now? If he does it again, however, there was a snatch event and there was a 1RM snatch. That does bode well for him. So programming has a lot to say, but on this next page, Luka Vunjak, definitely want to watch Georgios Karavis and Alice Katoulas, of course. Annie Olakai is a great talent. He's a great guy, but he's having trouble putting it together on game day. And he knows that. So if he can put forward the effort to reflect his talent, he's definitely in that mix. However, he is yet to do that at a major competition on game day at a live competition.
He has had success he has had success in Dubai. He did ultimately, I guess he lost on a tie break to Uldis in Pamplona, but he hasn't done it at the semifinal stage yet.
No.
And that's the stage where that's where things matter. But he's a great friend and training partner with Fabian Benito. And he saw the success. He has seen the success that Fabian has had over the last 18 months or so. I have had a chance to train with him, to talk to him. And I do think he's coming. I do think he will be in the mix, but all of these things that Niko's mentioning are things that are regular, that we regularly talk about. The discipline on game day, the attention to detail, the ability to adapt on the fly, the mental capacity to overcome things that don't go your way from whatever perspective. It's unlikely that you're going to have a Annie Thorisdottir 2012 type of performance. Everyone's going to have a bad workout relative to what they're expecting. How you respond to that is what matters, and that's an area for Anya Lakai to potentially improve.
And that's the thing, right? For some of these great athletes, Patrick Vellner does it on event one every time, but other than that, he does. Come on, Pat. No, but the last time BKG made a mistake, Rich Froning was the champion of CrossFit. Like, he doesn't make mistakes. And that's why he gets so many points. Is BKG that good? He's actually not. He's just perfect in the movement. He doesn't get no reps, and he doesn't make mistakes. So he's going to get the maximum amount of points. And there's some of the other athletes, if they got the maximum amount of points, they would have better performances overall.
Yeah, this is it's like, how do I optimize or maximize my potential? There's obviously a perfect score that you could get if you win every workout, but everyone realizes that that's not possible. And so this comes down to moments. And it comes down to those things that Niko said too: moving well, not getting no reps, understanding how a CrossFit competition works over a series of days, how a workout evolves and flows. But pretty much in every workout, at some point, these guys are going to get into a portion of the workout, and they're going to realize those are the two guys on my left and right. Yeah, these are the couple guys where I have a chance to make a move and steal some points from them. And the ability to do that consistently over time is what adds up. And that's something that the best, the greatest are very good at.
Exactly. I remember I saw an interview with former wide receiver of the New England Patriots, Julian Edelman, and he said his first practice with Tom Brady, he was like, "Really? Is that it?" And he was just like surprised, like, he's good, but he's not special. And he was like, "Well, I've seen the video. I played against him." And I'm like, all right. But then they went on the field of play on week one, and it was like, "Oh, okay, I got it. Like, you're perfect." Because you can't win in training. You can't win the CrossFit Games in June. And with all due respect to Johanna Koski, amazing performance on the Open, but he's going to agree with you on this. He's going to throw that Open finish away if he can just cash in the Games ticket right now. Because it has to happen on game day. And some athletes are better than others on game day. I've seen Annie Thorisdottir break down crying in 2015, saying she couldn't perform the workout. The movements were bad for her. And 7 days later, set a world record. Catherine Tanya was the same. She is the same. She can perform on game day. Tia Claire Toomey couldn't perform. That's really harsh. She took second 2 years in a row. She couldn't perform optimally on game day. When she fixed that, the rest of the field was screwed. You had to shop.
There was a 1 year window for Cara, and she tried her best, but then
she almost had it. Yeah.
And so when you look at the rest of this list and you see some names like, you guys may or may not know these guys, but like Mikko Liljeorg, Toby Buckland, Nika Maizaradze, very talented athletes, all of them in their own regards. I've seen them compete in person. I've talked to them. I know what their life is like, their training is like, their ambitions are, but they don't have the same competition experience. And so even if these guys make it to a semifinal, it's potential to see them have a great workout, a top 5 finish in a workout, because they have that capacity. But to be able to have 6 or 7 finishes in the top 15, which is going to be required probably at a minimum for most of those guys to even be in the conversation, that's a different story. And that requires a different kind of thing that not everyone can do in their first or second attempt at it.
And I think that's just it. That's a Kobe Bryant mentality. He used to figure out, he was, after 70 games, he got bad at throwing the ball because he was shooting it short. He was still on a straight line because he just wasn't strong enough. And go back to Victor Hoffer. Why didn't he qualify? Well, his running obviously wasn't good enough. He didn't have the brute strength to just like perform, and that's why he did bad on Linda. and he took 26th on the snatch. So he didn't have it. What do? You start running and you find a fucking weightlifting coach, a no bullshit weightlifting coach, and that's Eric. So he's trying to close those gaps because he can be upside down doing all the gymnastics he wants, as long as he has these peaks and valleys, because he had 3 workouts outside of the top 25. You can't do that. Right. You can't do that qualified for CrossFit. Then he had a 5th, a 2nd, and a 1st. So if Victor Hoffer wins European semifinals, I'm not surprised. But it depends on the workouts.
And so this is just 40 athletes that I've kind of picked out here, but I can guarantee you that of those 40 athletes that we've looked at so far, not all of them will even be at the European semifinal. There's another list of, I think there's close to 50 athletes in this section of the list. There's less information on them here, but all of these guys are on this list for at least one of 3 reasons. They either had a really great open this year, a really impressive quarterfinals last year, or they've done well in an off-season competition that I either have been at or am aware of. Many of them check at least 2 of those boxes, and that's a lot of other names that are going to be in the mix during quarterfinals and have a chance. I think that it's likely that between 2 and 7 of these guys take semifinal spots away from some of those other athletes we were just talking about.
Well, I just want to mention one guy on there. If you go into the middle right, Thomas Scheuer. So he's going to win Fittest in Denmark. He will most likely compete at quarterfinals. He's not going to take a spot if he qualifies. So he's going to go with Team Krieger from Butcher's Lab, and I think they will make it to the CrossFit Games. The same goes if you go to the opposite side for Felix Ritter, 3rd from the bottom. He's going to go with the team that qualified from Lowlands, Team Fleck. They took 5th place in Lowlands and qualified for the CrossFit Games. So he's on that team with the same group of people that were on the team last year. So he's also on a Danish team. He moved to Denmark for this reason. But yeah, someone on this list will make the semifinals. Someone on this list, this page, will do something we did not see coming at semifinals.
Yeah, and we're not going to go through, every single person on here, but there are names that I know. I could speak about a majority of these guys at least a little bit, but some of you might recognize a couple of them from various different competitions we've covered or individual specific workouts that they've done. A couple of them did have some notable performances at semifinals in the past couple of years, but it's just as an example. And then there's still people, beyond this that will, that will factor in. There always are, but just this article is kind of just put together to give you an idea of how I think that the word is depth, how deep the talent is. It's not that it's the best athletes in the world, but 1 through 40, 50, 60, there's a lot of athletes that can make some noise in a given competition weekend. And what that results in is that athletes who have really high expectations or lofty goals are going to be disappointed at some point. Some of them aren't going to make the semifinals, and they're not going to believe it. They thought there was a guarantee that they would make it. Some of them that thought they'd be in fighting position for a game spot at semifinals are going to be in the first heat all weekend long, and they're just going to be like, what is going on? Why am I not 15th, 12th, and competing for a game spot right now? And then there'll be people who've made the CrossFit Games before that don't make it again. People who made it last year that don't make it back there.
But I think that there is a lot of depth. But the thing is that there's not a lot of these people who can compete for event wins at the CrossFit Games. Lasse Dukic can. Jelle Hoste obviously has won an event at the CrossFit Games. Jonny Koski has won an event. BKT has won an event. Outside of that, or maybe a gymnastic event for Victor Hoffer, Adrian Mundweiler has won an event on a bike, obviously. But I don't see a lot of these people winning or taking top 1, 2, 3 at the CrossFit Games, which essentially is what the sport is about. It's great to win the semifinals, it's great to qualify, but the sport is about the CrossFit Games. And I don't know why. The notion that it was an American sport to begin with, that's kind of phased out because the sport is so old now in relative terms. So I don't know why Europe is still lacking in the sense of having these home run hitters and being behind the curve on top finishes.
That's a great question, and I don't have a definitive answer for that either. But I wanted to kind of ask you about the other end of the spectrum. If you are these athletes, and if you had a chance to speak to these athletes, I was just giving an example. Tiago Lucis there, I believe a Portuguese guy, young athlete, was kind of making some noise a couple of years ago, faded a little bit. Just saw that he posted something on Instagram the other day. T-minus 22 days. Like, he's locked in for quarterfinals. He's committed to that stage of the season with the intention of making semifinals. He believes it. His team believes it. He's been putting everything in. And whether it's him or any other one of these guys that are in the same boat that they don't make it, what would you say to him about where to go from there?
Well, first of all, I'd figure out what mindset is the right one for me. Going back to Andre had a board for 100 days or whatever. He had to check each list, and if he checked each list, it was like eating, sleeping, training, all the stuff he could control, all the variables. And if he'd done that, he knew he'd done enough. And then it was just like he doesn't believe in outcome based performances. It's more of a what do you put into the performance? But that is the way he likes it. He likes it in these boxes. He likes a square, but maybe that doesn't work for you. So you got to figure out who you are as a person and as an athlete. And will that add pressure to you? Will it make you better? Or are you more of a person that needs a little bit more freedom? Take Adrian Mundweiler. He needed to move away from Switzerland, and he finds himself in Spain, where he likes to be. Look at your life, look at all the variables and what you can control, and find a place where you're happy. And there's different limitations. Maybe you have a job, maybe you have a wife, maybe you have a kid, maybe you're studying, maybe you don't have the option to go travel, but figure out what your options are, and you have what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have, the other people have. Just figure out what you have, your opportunities, your parameters, and then schedule your life and your athletic life around that. And stop worrying about what anyone else is going to do. It's not a contact sport, so you can't manipulate the outcome by hitting someone else or grabbing the ball from them. You can only stay in your lane, literally. You're going to get kicked out of the competition. But I would always say, and this goes back to what Rich Froning used to say, train with people that are better than you and be humble about it and be okay with losing. Because I remember Chris Hinshaw saw Catherine lose a running workout at some point, and he basically said, you just won the CrossFit Games. It was like in May or something. Because if he could close that gap and she was already up there and she had such a big hole, that just means she has so much potential to get better. What is Tia-Claire Toomey going to do to get exponentially better? Like, what skill doesn't she have? There's so little room for improvement for Tia-Claire Toomey. Matt Fraser, how is he going to get better? Well, he's not competing, but how is Jeffrey Adler going to improve from last year to this year? What didn't he do well? So if you're an athlete, be humble about it and talk to someone who's smarter than you. And there is people that are smarter than you, whatever it is. Andre does it all the time as a coach. He seeks out people who are specialists and then figure out what you can use from them and what you can't use. And just know that there's another season coming, and get some reps in. Don't go to junk competitions, and not necessarily the competition is junk, but if you're not prepared, you're not ready to compete, don't go. Set a few competitions and really go for it, truly. Roman got hurt. That's what happens for Adler. No, getting hurt is part of sport. And Roman got injured. That's a part of sport. So what? Then Sam Briggs, whatever. She competed against a lot of people who weren't there. But talk to people that are smarter than you.
Yeah, that's very, very well said, and good advice for these athletes for sure. And I think that last piece that you spoke about is also important. And you can hear it in some of the context that we've given with a few of the athletes we've talked about. There are competitions all over the place of a variety different of experience levels that you want to have, from a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day competitions you can travel to, competitions that will be live stream, competitions where the organizers are relatively new, competitions that have been around for a long time. Be selective about the ones you go to. Reach out to people like Niko is recommending, who've been around, ask for some advice. And if you realize that on a quarterfinals weekend or a semifinals weekend, you didn't maximize your potential for whatever reason, one of the best ways to do that is to practice doing it. But not if you're talking about a Moonvile or even a Luka Jukic that are competing dozen times over the course of the year, there's a reason they're doing that. Yeah. They've actually already had some success, and they know what doing that is going to do for them in terms of finances, as Niko talked about, in terms of exposure, and in terms of also the potential price that you can pay when it comes to the CrossFit game season. If you want to have success in the CrossFit game season and you don't this year, it doesn't mean that you're never going to, but think about a strategy that may be selecting 1 or 2 off-season competitions and prepare for those and execute those with a purpose, and then go back to the drawing board and learn from it. And that's the process if you want to try to close the margins that are incredibly small at the top end of the sport.
Can I just say one more thing about the CrossFit Games this year and Roman got injured? Before Roman got injured, the 3 events leading up to his injury, Jeffrey Adler took first, Roman took 5th. That's 1 event win. Second one, Adler took 2nd, Roman took 3rd. Next one, Adler took 7th, Roman took 17th. Then Adler took 4th and Roman took 16th. Then we had the Muscle Up Logs where obviously Roman got injured. Roman was in no way, shape, or form on his path. Path meaning it's a trajectory going, what way is it going? Could he won the CrossFit Games? Maybe, I don't know, who knows? But the trajectory was not him, and he would have lost the leader's jersey on that event, and he had 4 or 5 back-to-back event losses to Jeffrey Adler. So saying Roman was on his path to winning CrossFit Games is not correct.
Are you paralleling Roman's CrossFit Games last season to the Philadelphia Eagles season?
Again, if you only go by stats, Roman Krennikov is the worst CrossFit Games athlete there ever is, right? He's not. He's maybe the favorite to win the CrossFit Games. As so, Eagles will face the Kansas City Chiefs and lose in the Super Bowl. We got Saquon Barkley, and they just announced you can't do a hip tackle anymore. Good luck, buddies.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into that. I saw those things, whatever.
But
I had to take a shot at
Jeffrey Adler was on an upward trajectory, and Roman was on a downward trajectory before the injury.
Right. Patrick, you've listened to this conversation basically for an hour. Obviously, you have a ton of experience as well. Are there any kind of angles and nuances that you feel like we've missed in kind of assessing the men's field this year?
I mean, I think you kind of hit on a lot of good points both of you have in terms of just the athlete changes, especially for this year. Niko brought up, like, I think the biggest thing we need to kind of concentrate on is, like, for me, is the training camps. How someone like Lazar left Mayhem and he's back with his original coach. Someone like some of the athletes, like, who is it? Fabian and or Guillaume Brion looks like he's spending a lot more time with the training culture people.
Yeah.
Houdet bringing some people in. Krieger bringing in a bunch of athletes. I think we're really going to see those changes that these athletes made during the off season. We're really going to see that a lot in quarterfinals. So what you put together is a very good list to kind of go off of, but I still think it's incomplete, based on some of those factors, specifically training camps, changing of coaches and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people who don't put a lot of faith or a lot of I guess they don't invest in, they don't think the coaching and the camps are that important to some of these athletes, but I think I 100% think it's absolutely something like that. And, I think, it's proven itself. I mean, you look at someone in Oceania, someone like Jay Crouch, who has gotten tremendously better over the last year since he made the move to Proven. And I think we're going to see something like that with one of these athletes who made a jump. So maybe someone like Lazar, who made the change for Mayhem, maybe he does jump up into that top 3 or the top 5. Traditionally he's been 8th and 9th, but maybe going back or a change in scenery will make the difference. So I think that's definitely something that we definitely need to talk on maybe later on. Maybe not about Europe, but overall about CrossFitters, and see how some of these changes have affected some of these athletes.
I think 1 year is kind of fast for a change.
Sure.
Bill Gates said people overestimate what you can do in a day, you underestimate what you can do in a decade. I think 1 year is a little bit, and also even a year is basically it's only like 5 or 6 months because you have the off season, then you have the season. How much can it really change? But I'm definitely agreeing on that. And I think for a guy like Lazar, I'd love to see him back home. But I always think going back to football, you always talk about year 2. That's why I'm pointing to Janikowski now, because this is year 2 with Jami Tikkanen, and you kind of settling into a groove. And first things first, and he won the Open. Like, that's the facts is out there. It's undeniable. I want to see what Jana does, and I think Jana want to prove that, hey, I'm not done.
Yeah.
So I think Jana want to go out there and win. I think he wants to win quarterfinals. I think he wants to win the semifinals.
Yeah, and
so he's going out there with a chip on his shoulder in a good way, and he's using that motivation in a good way.
He's a great example of what I was referencing with Adrian Munfeiler. He's 10 years deep in his games career. He missed 1 year, 2018.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's been at the games every year. And last year, on paper, was tied for his best ever finish at the CrossFit Games of 6th. I think it was without a doubt his best performance at the CrossFit Games, though, because he did that in a year where there was no swimming.
Yeah.
And on average, years when he has swimming, he improves by 1.5 to 2 spots relative to the field. Obviously, being one of the best swimmers and having a bunch of wins in that kind of a format.
That dude has a collection of leader jerseys, unlike anyone else.
Who hasn't won the games? Yeah,
hasn't won the games.
The funny thing is, remember he wore the leaders jersey for the thruster and wall walk workout. It was a 10-1 thrusters and wall walk, and he shouldn't have the leaders jersey. It was BKG's leaders jersey, but they didn't have time to make a jersey for BK. So they forced Jana to wear it, and he walked in and just threw it away because he didn't want to show disrespect to his friend, but he had to wear it, CrossFit said. But so BKG has had the leaders jersey. He just never got it.
Never worn it, unfortunately.
No, they never gave him one, which would be a classy move by CrossFit. Just like, hey, give him a jersey.
That would be a classy move. That little Instagram post that PC put together there does have a few little bios on some of the athletes that we didn't hit on. Obviously, there's a ton of great athletes in Europe and all around the world. The main idea today was to just give you guys an overview of what's going on with the men in Europe, which is fun to do, but also keep in mind that it's a narrow look at the reality in many regions around the world. If you guys like this and you want us to do some other ones, I'm considering 1 or 2 other regions, one in particular for the women.
Asia.
Yes,
Asia
Niko?
women.
Brian and Patrick, who's going to win? Forget about quarterfinals. There's too many variables. Who's going to win the European semifinals for men?
I will ride with Lazar until he loses one.
All right. Is he still in comments? He's going to get mad at me.
He's probably asleep now.
Okay, good.
I mean, I would go Lazar, but I think someone that might contend for that would probably be someone like, I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Annual or Victor maybe pull off.
I'm going 3-peat. Jana's going to win the Open. He's going to win quarterfinals in Europe, and he's going to win the European semifinals.
Oh,
and he's going to do well at the games. And I think he's, breaking the top 5 is a tall order.
It really is.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, you see, because even though you have that experience, and we've seen how valuable that can be, it's really hard to ignore a guy like Dallin Pepper.
Dallin Pepper, Ricky Gerard, Roman Korenikov, Jeffrey Adler, Brent Fikowski, and Patrick Vellner are, in my opinion, the only ones who can win the CrossFit Games.
I don't think that many of them can win the games, but I would include Justin Medeiros in that list.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to. Yeah, I forgot. Well, I blame people having short-term memory, and I just did that.
Any last thoughts? Either of you guys? Men's field in Europe. No. Patrick. I didn't see too many questions.
What does that mean? Only 4 of his 35 wins. 35 wins in what?
Basically, in the database that we have, it's constantly growing, but there's something like 350 total competitions and around 40,000 different athletes in there. And when we pull Janikowski, of all elite competitions that he's participated in, he's won 33 individual events. This could be an open win. It could be a semifinal win. It could be an off-season event win or a CrossFit Games win.
I just forgot Jeffrey Adler on my list.
I was trying to figure out who you forgot.
Oh, I just
knew you
assumed that you had mentioned him in that list.
Yeah, I know. So did I.
Yeah, so did I.
You went through it so quick.
Yeah.
So anyway, the 4 of Jonas wins out of 33 have come in swimming events, showing that he has the capacity to win events that don't have a swim as well.
Yeah.
Barkley, we need to come out with a logo that says like, friendly stats or whatever, and put that in place of your picture. So that way, every time it comes up,
I like that picture of him.
it is a very good picture.
I'm either gonna jinx it or manifest it. I don't care. Patrick Vellon's gonna win the CrossFit Games.
Okay, there we go.
Probably gonna jinx it, Pat. I'm sorry.
On March 26th at 2:05 Central.
Wasn't expecting that today.
10:05. Was it? It's 10. It's what 2200 where you're at right now, Niko.
Yeah.
But
2005.
yeah. Look at that. Look at that math. There was a lot of questions regarding,
I got Pat right there on my wall.
Yeah, there were some questions regarding where these, if Europe does get, let's say, 12, 15 spots, where we
okay
spots would come from.
Yeah. So they can't. If you guys are watching Get With The Programming's like leaderboard analysis week after week, that's a different system that they're using. They're suggesting a system that it's technically, if you listen to Dave Castro's Weekend Review where he briefly addresses this, it's technically still a performance-based system. It's just that the performances that Bill and Chase and those guys are analyzing are this season's performances.
Yeah.
Only after 1 week of the Open, 2 weeks of the Open. At this point, they've done one after 3 weeks of the Open. I have done studies of these models for 5 or 6 years now, and what I've found to be the best, I do think that there is a case to be made, like they're making, for the increasing the relevancy of the Open and the quarterfinals performance this year for the athletes that are actually attempting to qualify for semifinals. That's something that I think the CrossFit Games can refine, because in the model we currently have, those athletes, for example, that Niko just mentioned, or people like Noah Olson or Chandler Smith, they can compete in the individual quarterfinals and maintain their spot in the top 100 worldwide rankings, which would help the case for whatever region they live in, North America, East, West, Europe, whatever. But they're not actually in the season. They're choosing to compete on a team, and therefore, and I think that Chase and Bill agree with this and are presenting this, we should remove them from the season. If you're pregnant, you're not competing, you're not part of the season. If you're Mal O'Brien last year, you won the quarterfinals, but then you announced that you're not competing, you would be removed from the equation. These types of examples. And in that model, because there's less minimum spots, which is something that I've been a proponent of as well, they only are giving 1. That means that they have 33 spots to allocate as opposed to the 17 that CrossFit has available to allocate. With only 17 spots to allocate, and the way that the DeHunt method of distribution is, you're never going to see 14 or 15 or 16 spots in one region. There's just, it doesn't actually mathematically make sense. So there's a limit. And I think it's around 13 is the limit that any one region could possibly get. So when we're saying that Europe has the chance to get 11 or 12, that means that they're about as good as can possibly be. And North America East on the men's side will be in the same echelon as that.
Yeah. I never agreed on CrossFit's way to do this, and especially the lack of transparency and how hard it is to figure out and how late you can figure out what's going to happen. But if I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here, the person taking 13th in Europe and thereby not qualifying for the CrossFit Games, do we care? Like, do we actually care about, for that specific person? Of course we care. It sucks for them. But then someone else is going to qualify from South America, whatever. But he's not a person that's going to make a difference at the CrossFit Games.
Yeah.
So that's a yellow.
I mean, there are instances. I mean,
there's
outliers. There's outliers.
If I want to use the women's West, for example, Kelly Baker barely made it, but yet, she made it to the. I mean, and theoretically, she should have made that second cut if Jamie Green would have, declared that she was unable to perform after that second cut. I mean, Kelly Baker's still competing, at the games, and who knows? It's just like the whole, you just don't know exactly. But I still think like someone like Kelly Baker, there are some instances, but I get what you're saying. But I think at the end of the day, it's like we don't know unless they're given that chance,
Right, but more likely than not, the top 5, the top 3, and especially the winner of the CrossFit Games will always find a way.
Sure. Sure. Exactly.
Yeah, and no, and kind of the
Well-
conversation ends up breaking down to, are you as a fan more interested in seeing the 40 best individual men at the CrossFit Games, regardless of if they're all from the USA, or do you like having the international distribution? And if so, to what degree do you want to have it?
There's a happy medium, but
Yeah, there is.
you know,
there is.
CrossFit, I don't, you know, that's obviously CrossFit's decision to make that. I mean, Brian, we've talked about this, Niko. We've all talked about like what we've come up with some really great ideas, you know, but at the end of the day, it's like CrossFit has to pull the trigger on them or listen to people outside, or maybe listen to people inside within their building on how to improve it. But at the end of the day, I think CrossFit's made so many different changes over the years to the season. Let's just stick with what we have. It's not perfect. Let's stick with it, see what it does for the next couple of years. You know, that's
Yeah.
all that's all.
I want to go back to more of an NFL model where you change small stuff all the time, but it's essentially it's the same. Like,
Yeah,
and there's
I
a
mean,
council, and you can propose like banning the tush push. Yeah, it didn't happen,
Yeah.
but you know there's steps to it, and then Brent Fikowski can speak volumes to this of how to do it, but you can't just change the whole season. Like, okay, next year it's going to be 40 teams in the NFL.
Well, you can,
Okay.
because CrossFit's done it. What
You
3,
can,
4
but-
times?
But is it ever? Is it ever?
I think what
moving in the
Nico's
right
saying is
direction?
like, if you look at other organizations that have
Yeah.
proven to be successful over
Yeah.
a long period of time,
They've
a
improved.
majority of the things are predictable and consistent, and there are small changes season to season. And that is totally normal. The
Yes.
complete overhauls of the model on a regular basis is probably in the long run a recipe for
Yeah.
disaster.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
again, in CrossFit defense, something happened in 19 where Greg Glassman kind of pulled the trigger on a hand grenade, and then, but you know, then they had to restructure everything and kind of bring it back. What they should have done is just like, hey, let's just forget about what happened this year and just go back to what we had. Like, they didn't have to reinvent something.
And I
Or
don't,
at
I mean,
least-
and like, if you think about it in the big picture, it is, you know, at some point, it's better earlier, I guess, to try something like that. They realized that it wasn't what they wanted. They've gone back to
Yeah.
a model. We've had relative consistency over the last couple of years, where people now, have a general understanding of how the season progresses, especially for the best athletes in the world. The stuff that the Get With The Programming guys are doing, I think, is a great experiment. It's great conversation. It does shed light on a lot of relatively lesser known athletes, as we're trying to do on this show. But from some of the comments, it feels like it's a little confusing what they're doing compared to what CrossFit's doing. There are some very distinct differences in those two systems. So you have to understand, if you're listening to that stuff, which I'd encourage you to do, it's great if you like this sport, is that's a thought experiment, and it's not comparable to what's actually going to happen. So when we are saying that there's kind of a limit on number of spots, that's based on the math of the system that currently exists. They're exploring a different system.
Yeah. And they let that known. I mean, you know,
Right.
They
even if they let it known every time, it doesn't mean that everyone listening.
Bill and Chase know better than anyone else regarding how hard it is to change things within the buildings of CrossFit HQ. So, yeah, I think the other question, I think that was mainly it's just, you know, some people debating where the spots might go and the number of spots. But shout out to SPM as always. Was that 10 pounds? Is that pounds there, Niko?
That's pounds.
I don't know.
I do realize a hand grenade doesn't have a trigger; it has a linchpin. But whatever.
It doesn't matter. I mean, who knows? Maybe there are grenades with. I mean,
maybe there are.
Maybe there are. We don't know. Know.
You've been in the army. I haven't been in the army.
I know. I haven't seen them yet, but of course, there's so many crazy stuff out there.
Yeah.
I'm just a public affairs officer now, so I don't see all the cool shit. Will
you guys be in France? You will be, Brian.
Brian will be. I'm looking at the possibility of going to Korea
for Asia semifinal.
Asia semifinal.
No, yes, I'm planning to be in France, Carson, and Knoxville 3 consecutive weeks, and hoping that you'll join me in Lyon, Niko.
I will. And now I'm going to join my television as my cousin is in the starting lineup for Denmark in a football game. A football game.
Wow.
With a U.
Not soccer.
I know.
We call it football over here.
It's a match, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a football match.
It's a match.
Soccer match.
A soccer game, a football match.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Niko, thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you, guys.
One of the best in the business on the behind the camera and a ton of experience. So appreciate you stopping by. Good luck to your team, whatever team it is.
It's Denmark.
Oh, it's the national team that's playing.
He's starting for the national team.
I know he plays on some club teams too. So
he's starting for the national team tonight. So, yeah.
Damn, that's cool.
That's cool.
All right, brother. We'll see you on the road.
Take care. Bye.
Nikolaj Ronnow, one of the best, one of a good friends of ours, will be in France with me for semifinals. That's the plan, at least. So looking forward to catching up with him there in person. But great depth of knowledge historically. Still pretty plugged in with the CrossFit stuff, even though he's not doing it full time anymore. So kind of a treat to have him on for something like that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. PC.
Use friend 20 for 20% off HDR CBD products. As always, thanks to Carl and his whole crew there. We actually do have something up on a story. You click on a link, takes you right to the Relief stick that Brian uses. So if you click on that link in our story, it'll take you right there. Use friend 20 for 20% off the Relief stick. I think it saves you some monies, and I believe maybe some shipping. So make sure you tune into that, and shout out to them. Rest of the week, we plan on Friday to do a preview show of our Reps Ahead, and then Saturday it's the big day with Reps Ahead. So make sure you subscribe and hit the alert button for both of those segments coming up. And then next Tuesday, we have the GOAT, Matt Fraser, the man. He's coming on with us, so we're looking forward to that. So we will probably open up for a couple questions from those tuning in. It should be fun. It's always great whenever we can talk to Matt, because Matt, I've told Brian this the other day, he's one of the best storytellers that we have in CrossFit, and hopefully he has some good stuff for us to share. But should be pretty cool conversation. But a lot of cool stuff on the horizon. Brian's got some cool things on the way. Some domestic travel possibly, and some pretty cool, exciting things. And then tomorrow we'll announce our friend of the week for this week. So we had 2 last week. We have 1 this week. Kind of relatively light weekend in terms of CrossFit competition and fitness in general. So look out for that article for tomorrow in the post. But yeah, just things are busy right now. A lot of stuff going on, and we appreciate all of you that are along for the ride as always.
Well said. I got nothing else.
You got nothing else? Okay. Jeffrey, I guess you can call it a deployment. I mean, I'm going to Germany. It's not a combat deployment, but and then Jeffrey, I'm gonna redo that workout with Brian. Okay,
my man.
But thanks everyone for showing up. Shout out to Niko. What a great get a chance. If you want to read the article, I highly encourage you to read the article. The link is in the description to the article. Head on over there and then check out our Instagram post that just went up as well. So thanks everyone. As always, be friendly, our friend.